have Sadie Wile here with us this afternoon.
Not proud.
We are happy to have Sadie Wile here with us this afternoon. Good. Without further ado, we're going to let Sadie get started. Okay, let's welcome Sadie.
Shall I start talking? It's loud enough. It's too loud.
No, you're good.
Is it okay? Okay. Here I have memories of my childhood by Sadie Wile Moyer. I was born on a farm in Franconia Township, March 31st, 1920, to Jacob S. and Mary M. Wile. Was the third daughter, had two older sisters. Eva was 8 and Mary Ellen was 15 months when I was born. And then I had two younger brothers, Jacob and John. My parents lived on an 80-acre farm they bought in 1914. Had a dairy till about 1922. Then they started raising potatoes. Had over 400 bushels to the acre in 1927. Had bought another farm and some more land till they had 220 acres. I remember we helped work in the fields when we were about 10 or 12 years old. We went to a one-room schoolhouse when I was 6 years old. I had to walk 1 mile each way in all kinds of weather. Except on very rainy days, they would take us to school. I liked school a lot. There were about 40 children there in one room, and 8 grades were in one room. One day we had class up front, like flashcards in addition, and the one who knew the answer first got to wear a red ribbon. We weren't supposed to count on our fingers behind our back. Well, I counted on my fingers. And I got to be in first place and I wore the red ribbon. But my friend saw me do it and she said the other girls shouldn't talk to us because I had cheated. And I didn't like that at all when I had no friends. So in about 2 days she was upheaded and I let her have the ribbon again. So. The years between 4 and 10 were good years, not too much work. One time a hired man and his family lived next door, and they asked my sister and me to wrestle to see who was stronger. Our mom found out about it and sent us both to bed without supper. I remember we never wrestled again. And we were upstairs, we heard birds singing, and we were hungry and heard people talking, but we couldn't come down. We didn't have toys like children have now. I had one doll with a porcelain face, painted hair, black mid-hands and black feet and legs. And I had a pair of homemade wooden stilts and a rope swing on a branch of a tree and a doll with hair, but the doll couldn't close her eyes. She just was an ordinary doll. I remember when we raised potatoes, people would come from 4 or more counties to see our crops. Sometimes 50 or 70 cars would come, one after the other, to see our fields. That was exciting for someone who never had cars come, except visitors or business people. In the fall, when the potatoes were dug, we had 10 or 15 people come to pick them. They put a ticket on each, or a tag on each top of the bushel crate. And at night, we counted the tags, and I think we paid 5 cents a bushel. Sometimes a person picked 100 bushel. That was a big wage for that time. Later in winter, we helped grate potatoes. One man shoveled potatoes on the grater. The small ones dropped out the side, and we picked away the checks or the hot potatoes. The man at the other end bagged them in 100-pound bags and tied or sewed them Then we sold them by the truckload to Philadelphia. After I was out of school, we three girls did some work in the fields, sometimes with tractors and trucks. We helped make hay in the meadow and along the road. When threshing season, you know, I don't have my glasses. The man put the potatoes on the grater, the small ones dropped out the side, and we picked the checks or the odd potatoes and put them separate. The man at the other end bagged them. Oh, I did read that. After I was out of school, we three girls did some work in the fields. We helped make hay in the meadows and along the road. When threshing season was here, we had a man bring a threshing machine into the field. My sister and I would throw the sheaves from the wagon to my father, who fed it into the machine. It was very hot on the wagon. In the fall, we would husk corn. We had a team of horses and wagon. My oldest sister drove the horses, and we each had 2 rows of corn to husk. And every time it was too far for us to throw, she would drive the horses a little further. At noon, we went home and unloaded, had dinner and went to the field again, till time to come home. That lasted a few weeks. Later, we had a 2-row corn picker, and the men husked corn without our help. In the 30s, we had a drought, and potatoes did not do well. So we raised chickens. We had laying hens and roasters. Later on, we had turkeys. We had about 12,000 roasters and layers. We fed, watered, and gathered the eggs 3 times a day. We 3 girls did most of that work. Nights we often cleaned and graded eggs. When the field work was done, we had less work nights and had time to knit or crochet or play musical instruments. When we were about 11 or 12 years old, we asked to play oboe and guitar. And after we had ordinary guitars for 5 years about, I guess, then we got German silver guitars. We weren't supposed to have electric, so we had resonators built in there were resonators in the guitars. And they sounded pretty much like a violin. We took lessons a few years, and then when we had those new guitars, we played about 5 years more. Then I got a piano accordion. I wanted to play that. Then my sister bought a piano after that. We often played with cousins or girlfriends. We weren't allowed to have boyfriends till we were 18 years old. That was rather fun. Sundays we usually went to church. We had church every 2 weeks when I was little. Later on, we had Sunday school 1 week. My mother came from a large family. One Christmas, I remember they cooked 3 25-pound turkeys in a furnace. We had 75 people at large tables. Men and children ate first, women ate last. Most families brought a dish or more, so we all helped make the meal. In the afternoon, Grammy would give gifts and cookies and candy. Some was homemade. One year I got a sewing basket and a little hoop inside, and cookies and candy, an animal cracker box filled with cookies and candies. We went to our grandparents once a year overnight, usually Saturday afternoon, to my father's mother. And then we'd pick strawberries and eat strawberries out of her garden. Sunday morning she would read Bible story to us and sing. One year she sang, "Heaven is my home." Another time my step-grandpa played a small concertina. It's like an accordion, but real small. And he played, "Fade, fade, each earthly joy, Jesus is mine." That left quite an impression on me. We We had company Sunday dinners, went visiting often. I had 75 cousins, went to a few of them overnight once a year. When I was 7 or 8, our parents went to Ocean Grove one weekend with 3 other families for a few days. That was the first time that I ate at a restaurant. I remember I had iced tea and a glass straw to sip. They didn't have paper that time. All holidays and weekdays when we weren't real busy, we went on trips like to Hershey Gardens and Longwood Gardens and some nurseries. When I was 13 or 14, we 3 girls went to Atlantic City for a weekend. My older sister, she was 21, and she was our chaperone. We enjoyed jumping and riding the waves. At night we walked the boardwalk and saw shows. We loved seeing high-diving horses and hear real Hawaiians play and sing. After we were out of school, we could each raise 1 brood or so of baby chicks, 150 or 200 chicks, and we paid for the feed and the heat. And if we had any money left, that was ours. That's how we made money to pay for our guitars and our accordions and our trips. When I was 21, I made a nice profit on 1 set of baby chicks. So my sister and I went to the Grand Ole Opry in Nashville by train. That was one of the best trips I had. And the first time I was away from home that long. I loved the southern drawl and I loved country music. We often played with friends. Some played Spanish guitar, mandolin, or Hawaiian guitar. We weren't a lot boyfriends, so we played. I met Ralph, my husband, on a double blind date. Ralph's cousin told a few people that he wanted to ask my sister to go on a date as soon as he got a new car. It was after World War II, and new cars were scarce. So his cousin came to our door and asked my sister if we would go with him and his cousin Ralph on a double date. When she asked me, I had been writing to a soldier overseas for a few years, but I decided I should go along after he waited this long. So we went out for a drive and had an ice cream soda and milkshake, and Ralph seemed very nice, I thought. He asked to see me in a few weeks again. He was a manager at a shoe store in Carlisle. That was 120 miles away, so he didn't come home every week. And his parents lived in Souderton, so we knew who he was fairly well. Anyway, when Ralph talked to his cousin later, the cousin said my sister wouldn't go with him again. And Ralph said, well, he could come again in 2 weeks, so it didn't work the way they had planned. I said I had to think about it. After about 4 months, we were married. Ralph didn't like driving that distance every 2 weeks. And we weren't teenagers, so we were in our 20s. It wasn't as though we were 16. We were married Easter Sunday, April 6, 1947, in the First Lutheran Church in Carlisle. Had a reception at my parents' home for about 24 people, and then we left on a honeymoon to Florida for a week. Then we came home and went to Ralph's church and had a reception at his parents' place. Monday morning we left for Carlisle with some wedding gifts and some whatever we thought we need. And we went, did I do something wrong? And we went to a furnished apartment in Carlisle. And that was really fun, playing house. I got a job at Woolworth 5 and 10, enjoyed cooking and baking. And I missed my friends after a few weeks. We had no friends out, just a few friends out there. After about 6 months, we moved back home. Ralph got a job selling shoes in Philadelphia. We lived near my parents. After a year, Ralph thought he would like to raise chickens. So we rented a 3-floor chicken house that was across the field. And for 3 years, after 3 years, we bought a 35-acre farm near Harleysville. Ralph thought he would like to raise chickens and farm. We started to fix the barn, and 1 week before the final settlement, Hurricane Hazel came and blew off our barn roof and shed roof. That was rough. We decided to keep working. There wasn't much else to do. Nobody would buy it, but it looked like that. So we fixed it up for a chicken barn. Ralph did, we had a binder on the sale, so insurance paid for the new roof, or most of it at least. Both of us worked real hard. Ralph got cement floors in the barn, 3 floors, and he put asbestos shingles on the barn. And my father and 2 brothers helped, and they helped by putting up a scaffold so Ralph could get up there to work. And after that, he built a 2-car garage and a corn crib. In 3 years, we got the house cement washed. It had been bricked and was drafted. In the meantime, Ralph did crop farming, and I did gardening and lawn and all I could to help. After being married 6 years, we had our first son. Three years later, we had another son. We had been raising roosters and laying hens. It seemed every time we had lots of eggs, the prices were down. So after our second son was 4 months old, Ralph decided to look for work. He started as bookkeeper in Long Acres. He used to come home for lunch, which was only about a mile to come home. And after a while, he was office manager. And he worked there 28 years. So in the meantime, I did some gardening and had flowers and was busy raising the boys. And we did some trips to Florida and California, cruise in Europe. In 1973, we bought a ranch house about a mile from our farm and sold our farm. The boys were in high school, and we enjoyed life in our new home and I got part-time work cleaning. Later, I was a school bus driver. In 1990, our son lived in Missouri. We had 1 granddaughter who was 5 or 6 years old. And Ralph had retired from work, so we decided to sell our home and move to Missouri. We had an auction and sold about half of our things. Got a moving van to move our things to Missouri. We enjoyed our life in Missouri, made new friends, had a new house in Springfield on the edge of town. We lived about 35 miles from Branson, and we loved to see those shows. Our son lived about 20 miles from Springfield near Rogersville, and he lived on a 5-acre farm. So we had our garden out there, and we did mowing out there, and we saw our granddaughter fairly often. In 1993, I did a genealogy of my grandparent Landis' family. They were married in 1885, had 11 children, raised 10. In 1993, there were 696 descendants. My grandma Landis made a log cabin quilt out of my dress scraps when I was about 20 years old. That's on the table here. I was her first namesake. I always enjoyed cooking and baking and having guests for meals in Missouri. In Missouri, I introduced the ladies to chocolate pie and sticky buns and Pennsylvania Dutch things. They enjoyed to have those things. I worked at Ray's Greenhouse before we moved and at the Heritage Bakery. So I learned quite a few things about baking and raising things. It has been a full and interesting life. In 2003, we moved to SMH. There are so many activities here, lots of friends. I have pictures of my home here and quilts. pictures of the home where I grew up and the homes we had. If anyone has questions to ask, I'll try to answer if I can. That's it.